Hello, Two Forks Tower. This is Sissy Jones, voice of Delilah from Firewatch, and you are listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome one, welcome all to episode 118 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Saturday, February 5th, 2022. I am your host, Luke Lohr, the Insipid Ghost. In this episode, we sit down with TieGuyTravis of IGN, The Last Word, and Season Gaming's Bitcast to talk about the week's biggest gaming news, including the acquisition of Bungie by Sony, and, of course, the long-awaited release of Dying Light 2. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the Gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness go to a former Bitcast partner of mine, someone who is still there on that show, rocking it every week, one of the best dressed in the business, Mr. TieGuyTravis of IGN. How are you, my friend?
McClunky. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Luke, nice to see you, man. Or
It's
hear you.
good.
I guess I'm
Hear
not
me.
even seeing you this morning. Yeah,
That's right. There's no camera. You assured me in the lead up to this show that you would still be wearing a tie. Are you?
I am. In fact, wearing a navy blue hand knit tie, white shirt. You know, just you gotta dress to the nines on this Saturday morning, and not at all because I have to go to a nonprofit event immediately after this. Yeah,
this is absolutely for XEP. What kind of knot you got on that tie this morning?
You know, I do like the working man's tie. I know probably maybe 20 different knots by heart, and there's a lot more than that, believe it or not. But some of them be a little too fancy. Like I don't know if you know this, but the Windsor knot famously is worn by egomaniacs. Like Joseph Stalin wore it, and like Vladimir Putin, and I think like all these weird like tyrants wore it. So I try to stay away
Real
from that
winners
one.
of history, you might say.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Obama also wore it. Now that I'm thinking about it, so I don't know if what that says about him, but yeah, I try to stay away from that one. I typically do a knot called the 4-in-hand, which is one of the most common tie knots. It's like the classic tie knot in the Western world. So I typically will wear that if I'm just sort of like trying to get dressed as quickly as possible. That's the one my brain does on autopilot.
Sure.
But I appreciate a good knot, and I could talk about knots with the best of them.
I believe you. I know one knot. I learned it from YouTube 15 years ago, prior to starting my first real professional job. But my job doesn't demand it, but so often, and so I know that one.
You're a school teacher, right? In your
yes,
day life. Yeah, that's great. Right. I wonder if any of your students have discovered your content.
Yes, they have, and that has forced me to edit said content.
Content.
That's correct. Yeah, just to make sure that
you have to talk about Joe's mom a little less.
A little bit less. Yeah, bring the language down.
Yeah.
Yep. It's weird what people get offended by. That's something I learned working at GameStop for years. Parents, moms and dads, they'll come in and they'll be like, "Hey, do you have this new game, that new game?" And you have to go through the rigmarole of it's rated M for mature, whatnot. They are totally fine if you are mowing down civilians with a chain gun, but if you see a boob, they're out. And it's just wild to me. We're not cool with we're not cool with general nature, but we're cool with mowing people down in murder. It's always a funny thing to me.
I mean, you gotta have priorities, man.
That's true.
You got to teach them how to take a life before you can teach them how to make one, you know?
That's the best. It's the most like American sentiment ever. Oh gosh. I love it. Some of those kids went to the Capitol. So, all right, Travis, we've got you here. You are, of course, a writer for IGN. You also host over on the Last Word podcast. And of course, you're on the Bitcast. There is no better voice I can think of to come in here and talk about the biggest gaming news of the week and what would have been the biggest gaming news of the year had we not been 2 weeks removed from Microsoft acquiring Blizzard. Sony has purchased Bungie for was it $3.6 billion? This is
$6 billion. 1.2 of that going to employee retention. So the actual purchase price would be about 2.4 billion.
And some say they overpaid. So many questions here.
Yeah.
First gut reactions when you heard it earlier this week.
Oh, it was like a gut punch. I hated this news immediately. I was very heartbroken by it. Which might sound, dramatic or whatever, but if you know my relationship with Bungie, how long I have followed the company and had a vested interest in what they're doing, it was, I don't have a problem with PlayStation. Obviously, I like Sony as a company, and I have a PlayStation, so it doesn't really affect me. I own Destiny on like 7 different consoles or whatever. But yeah, that was my initial reaction. Was just, I was like, oh no, come on, guys, don't do this. We just finally got an independent Bungie. So that was my initial reaction.
So that is, and let me set the stage for listeners. I was really high on this. I think this is a great move. I was talking to Ainsley Bowden, your Bitcast partner, and then, of course, Joseph Moran, friend of me of the show from the Trophy Room. We had our cast co-op episode this past week. All 3 of us were really high on this deal. We felt like the price was great. They're going to stay multi-platform. There's a lot of, I thought, very good news coming out of this. And when you and I exchanged on Twitter, it couldn't have been more opposite. You said that gut punch statement. Let's talk a little bit before we talk about why you think it's a bad thing, just about some of the things that are going into this deal. Sure. Bungie's going to be will operate autonomously within Sony Interactive Entertainment. They're going to have control over what platforms their content hits. Of course, the Destiny IP is included in the purchase, but they're planning to remain multi-platform. To me, this felt like a very good thing. We also know they have another IP they're working on. Any other details off the top that you think listeners who are unfamiliar with the deal might want to know before we talk the pros and cons?
Yeah, well, I would say the big thing was the statement that both companies put out. It was a joint statement, and then there were also individual statements, and the first impressions that you got from that. And what Sony Interactive Entertainment cited was they're going to be gaining. Basically, they said that this was a move to gain live services, games as a service support, which I think makes a ton of sense for Sony. They badly need it. They're seeing Fortnite under Epic's umbrella. They just saw Warzone, one of the biggest games as a service out there, being purchased by Microsoft. And then Microsoft has also just sort of tried its own hand at games as a service before, including Minecraft. And they're seeing these big games as a service being gobbled up. Destiny is one of the biggest ones. It's independent, and this gives them access to a ton of brain trust and talent in the games as a service space. It also helps them with shooters, which Sony has never really had a good go of. They've relied tremendously on third party there. So that was their first statement. The first statement from Bungie was that this was a move for them to expand their IP into other media. So they specifically stated, they want TV shows and movies and music and stuff that Sony Interactive Entertainment already has the infrastructure to do. That was their kind of first thing that they cited. So that's the only thing I would add as the initial reaction, because that's what I read immediately. The statements, I went and looked for the statements and read that. And then that's sort of when it sunk in of like, oh God, like I kind of had like a weird feeling. And then I read it, and then I was like, oh. And the more I thought about it, the more I hated it. So that's kind of where I started.
One of those statements coming from Jim Ryan said, quote, "The first thing to say unequivocally is that Bungie will stay independent, multi-platform studio, and publisher." I found that interesting. Pete Parsons and I have spoken about many things over recent months, and this one of the first is actually the easiest and most straightforward conclusions we reached together. Everybody wants the extremely large Destiny 2 community, whatever platform they are on, to be able to continue to enjoy their Destiny 2 experience, and that approach will apply to future Bungie releases. That is unequivocal, end quote. That's a bold statement, I feel, because to your point, Sony's adding in a lot of talent to their internal studios that can share ideas, concepts, experience with bringing shooters to the market. I would argue that Destiny is best in class when it comes to shooting mechanics. And the games as a service elements are certainly going to be prominent as well as Sony works to bring Spartacus to market.
Mm-hmm.
And I too am excited by this transmedia stuff. I felt, Travis, that this was a great move, knowing they're going to keep supporting other platforms, but they're going to get funding to explore what a Destiny movie or showverse might look like,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing it branch into other platforms. The idea that they're losing independence, and I will, in an amateur way, push back on it. Feels to me like they have a lot of control over their stuff, and they're just getting funding. You don't see it that
Mm-hmm.
way?
Yeah. So let me get into my kind of 9-point statement here.
All right.
But sort of the first one is my idealism about Bungie. So I'll start there, and that has a lot to do with their independence, which is the way that the games industry, or really any industry, tends to function is at the top you've got the leaders, the people that have been in the industry for a long time. They're the biggest companies with the biggest budgets, and they make the biggest stuff. In this case, those industry leaders are people like Activision. They're people like Microsoft is a pretty big one, at least nowadays. They're people like EA or Ubisoft. Big budgets, lots of teams. They've been around forever, and people kind of know what to expect for them. In the middle, there are these challengers, the up and comers, the people that are kind of keeping the big older companies honest because they're trying to eat their lunch, basically. And then below that, you've got the indies that are experimenting and doing their own things. And there's kind of lots of crazy successes and crazy failures in that space, just because it's like the Wild West, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really care if big companies eat each other up. I don't care at all if Microsoft buys Activision, because I see Activision as a company that was one of those big old leaders who just messed up. They were getting attacked by from the top by California. They're getting attacked from the bottom by their own employees. Blizzard hasn't put out a game since 2016. They were just in trouble, and really the best outcome we could hope from that situation is that bad company that's not doing well, rather than going out of business and everybody losing their jobs, they get acquired by somebody that is also, another bigger company, and they can kind of just take that under their arm. And I don't really worry about that sort of consolidation in the industry, because they're just going to get filled by presumably another challenger that's going to level up and kind of fill that void. And I think that's probably a good thing. It's probably a natural part of the industry, of any healthy industry with lots of competition like ours is. What bothers me is when those middle and smaller companies get acquired before they really get a chance to experiment. Minecraft is one where I was a big Minecraft fan before Microsoft bought them, and then afterward I kind of wondered if this was going to hinder their growth as a company. You might be able to argue that it kind of has, right? Like they haven't really put out anything. They put out Minecraft Dungeons, and they've sort of experimented, but you've got to wonder how different that company would be and its culture would be had it not been acquired after making its first game. And
would the
similarly,
counterpoint of that be that Minecraft seems to be doing very well in terms of
Oh,
population and popularity?
Oh yeah, no doubt there. And I'm not one of those people who thinks at all that Minecraft has been ruined because of Microsoft. Not at all. It's more that and you could also argue that Minecraft was so popular it had to be acquired, right? Because it had explosive kind of success. But my point is, I just think it's healthy when there's these challengers. And I've been a Bungie fan since I was in grade school, right? Like I was super young when I started getting introduced to Bungie games, and Halo changed my life. And they've always sort of been this underdog group. And I think when they cut ties from Microsoft and then later went back on their contract with Activision, I've seen them as these up and coming challengers, people that could replace the void left by Bethesda ZeniMax, for example, a huge independent company that was sort of always an underdog and then eventually became big and big and big and then got acquired. But I could see them filling that void, and all of their messaging. And it's funny because like you and Ains and the rest of you, I don't think you guys are super close to Destiny and reading Bungie's This Week at Bungie posts every week.
That is correct.
The blog that they put out,
Correct.
right? But all of their messaging to players has been about how they want to be able to control their own destiny and that they want true independence. Because when they got out of that deal with Activision, Activision didn't even own them. It was just a publishing deal. That's all it was. And they wanted to be able to control their own publishing, their own IP. And all their messaging has been about that, right? And so there was that part of it where sort of they were going back on what they had said was their goal and that sort of thing. There was the fact that now that big independent thing that I kind of saw Bungie as the chosen ones, right? Like they were gonna grow up and replace an Activision or replace a ZeniMax and kind of become a big company that could potentially challenge one of these even bigger companies that was more established. And you can see that with them creating new IPs and really starting to branch out. And then the final part of it is really just the sentimental part, right? It's sort of it is idealistic, but it's Bungie, and I kind of wanted them and their journey to be different than kind of this massive consolidation. So that's like my first point, right? Is really just their positioning in the market, their positioning as a company, the promises that they made to their players about independence and kind of this ideology. The second thing, and that sort of bums me out about this, is the reason they did it. And this is where the gut punch came into account, right?
Okay.
Which is that Bungie has had a lot of trouble with making Destiny. The game has really had low points over the years, especially when they went away from Activision and went independent, and then they were first finding their feet, and kind of like growing up and all that stuff. And you would hope that
what kind of trouble? I don't mean to cut you off, but
no.
As someone who's outside looking in, I've heard praise and lamentation about multiplayer, about storytelling, about different content being removed in various updates.
Correct.
So outside looking in, tell me what's in trouble with it, or what has been in trouble with it.
Yeah, and to quote Han Solo, it's true, all of it. So all the lamentation, all the praise, like it is deserved, all of that. And I say that as a huge Destiny stan. Like I say this all the time on like Fireteam Chat and the Last Word shows I've been on where I talk about Destiny. Destiny is one of the best and 10 of the worst games I've ever played. And that's 100% true, right? Like they've changed so much over the years and throughout time that you really develop a really strong love-hate relationship with it. If you are a fan of other big multimedias, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. Like if you have any relationship with Game of Thrones, it's probably a love-hate relationship. That's Destiny for sure, except for amped up to 11 because it takes thousands of your hours to actually play it. So to walk you through it, they've had problems since the beginning, since their early Activision days with Destiny, where they just had trouble finding their footing. They had trouble creating content quickly enough for the players to like it. They've really, really always had trouble with telling a good story. The narrative in Destiny, in my opinion, has never been good in the game. It's always been at best okay, passable, but people don't really play Destiny. The vast majority of people don't play Destiny for story. It's one of those things you have to go and find it. You have to really actively try to be a part of the story.
Are we talking about like grimoire cards of old, like that meme? Or are we talking beyond that?
Grimoire cards, or reading descriptions on weapons, or if you play Forsaken, you can barely follow the story unless you've done some homework before to try to figure out what's going on. Like it's really, really tough. And people like to say, oh yeah, the Bungie, the Destiny story is really good. You just have to search for it. But in my opinion, that makes it not good. Like if it's not good unless you search for it, that's a problem. Because there's other examples, right? Like you and I are huge Halo lore fans, right? And that world, it gets better the more deeper and deeper you dive into it. But you can also play all of the Halo games, except for maybe with the exception of 4, and know what's going on in the story without really any problems.
Yeah, they're pretty good at being contained.
Yeah, they're pretty good at being contained, and you can understand what you're reading or what you're seeing on screen without all the context being there. And Destiny it does not do a good job with that, like at all, in my opinion. Like they just have so much problem with that. So they've had that one. And then to get to kind of the heart of your question, which is most recently their troubles have been, they weren't built for publishing. They had to build all of their publishing from the ground up. They had to, after splitting with Activision, they had issues with creating content again. With they had no PR people or any sort of like events that you could go to for like press events. Like they haven't had a press event since they left Activision, basically. Part of that is due to COVID, I imagine, but they've had that. And then there were just growing pains with the separation of Activision. They were sort of just left twisting in the wind. Their game was live already. People were playing it every day, and then they were saying, okay, well, we've got to do these incremental things to get off of Activision's support network, and we're sort of starting for nothing. And so there was a lot of issues. There's always been issues in Destiny, but I would say in the last couple years since the Activision split, they have had issues, and it finally feels like they were coming in their own as an independent studio. Like they got over that stuff, and they were sort of getting there. And so that is kind of another point of disappointment, right? Is that we went through this big turbulent period where Destiny content was a little whack, and we had to kind of wait for them to figure things out. And now they've sort of given up, right? Like they just said, all right, well, we can't figure this out on our own, apparently. So let's just get a big publisher to help us out.
Can you remove yourself from being a diehard Destiny fan and ask, like, does this spell bad news for people that are casual Destiny fans, if those exist? It sounds like you're either in or you're out. But to the outside looking in, and someone like myself, who I loved Destiny 1. I played a good bit of Destiny 2. But I left it a while ago. It was a different. I just didn't stick with it, I guess. Does this spell good news for me down the line? Will I get into Destiny by way of films or shows from this deal, or is it going to be par for the course? Talk to me about that.
So as a casual fan, I think it'll depend. Some people said that based on the way the deal was written out, which we haven't even gotten to the deal part, which I also have problems with, the way the deal is written. But some people said that because of the way the deal is written, Bungie is essentially going to remain independent, and there will be nothing bad come of that. And I completely disagree with that statement. And I also think that if you are a casual fan, there's a chance that something bad has already happened because of this deal. And that thing is that people were very, very curious and confused as to why Destiny, a game that claims that they want to be everywhere, and is on the Stadia through a subscription model and that sort of stuff, why in the world they were suddenly, after multiple years of being on the service, leaving Game Pass and not going with Game Pass with the Witch Queen. And now we sort of have our answer, right? Like this was without a doubt something where if you want to play Destiny, it'll probably be on PlayStation subscription service and will never return to Xbox's subscription service. And so it sort of depends, right? Like if you're an Xbox main, you don't own a PlayStation 5, and you play on Game Pass, and you're a casual Destiny fan, you play it when it's on there. For you, there will be negative effects. If you're a PlayStation player who subscribes to their PlayStation Now, and you were hoping that Destiny would come to there, then maybe it has good news for you. But my point is, consumer choice is already being affected in your options to play Destiny. And so, there are negatives, and to say that nothing is going to change and that you still have complete control, I think is 100% disingenuous, and sort of just ignoring or trying to deny what is actually happening, which is that you're being bought by a company that is a platform owner, right?
Okay. What about their other IP in the works?
Yeah, it sounds like that's going to be multi-platform. And to be honest, I think that in the next 5, maybe even 7 years, this deal will probably seem like it's working because of the way it's written. And it's very unique. We're having Hogue on tomorrow to talk about it, but he and I have already talked about this deal at length, and the weirdness of it. And both of our takeaways, he's somebody who currently works in mergers and acquisitions on the law side. And I used to work actually as a hatchet man, taking apart companies and helping them merge with new ones in my business life. So we both
cool.
So we both have a pretty big understanding of the way the acquisitions work, and kind of our analysis, him from a legal point and me from a practical point, is that this deal looks really good on paper. and it will probably work for the next 5 to 6 years. But inevitably, it's impossible to keep these two companies separate, and their interests will be 100% aligned, and all independence will be lost over time. And not because PlayStation is doing something insidious, but because for practical reasons, because these companies are going to intermingle, and PlayStation's going to, slowly have more of their people, or they'll just be seen as the same team. And so that kind of separation right now is strong because of the people that are there who view themselves as Bungie employees and not PlayStation employees. But that's going to be eroded over time until, PlayStation owns 100% of the stock for Bungie now, right? 100% of the shares of their company. And over time, that's going to mean that, you've got people with PlayStation's interests first on the Bungie board of directors. And eventually it's just going to happen, right? Like one day you're just going to kind of look over and you're not going to notice it. And you're going to be like, oh, right, these companies are basically the same thing now. And it's not going to seem weird or separate. Even if they have that deal in place, it's really not going to matter at the end of the day. So I view this as a long-term play. The other thing that I think could happen on the business side that would be bad is I'm really happy PlayStation did 1.2 billion dedicated to keeping employees. And I think that's an incredibly smart move, and I think it will benefit Bungie. But the 1.2 billion isn't to keep people at Bungie, it's to keep people at PlayStation. And I think there could be a brain drain at Bungie where PlayStation is taking these Bungie employees and having them work on all these other live service games that they clearly want, but Sony said they plan on releasing 10 live service games, in their statement, or
by 2026, I want to say
by 2026, right? So you can assume Bungie's going to be involved. Bungie employees are going to be involved in all of those, since they're the only team that knows how to do it at Sony. And that they're not all going to be Bungie owned properties, right? It's going to be them helping other teams. And probably some of those people are going to leave Bungie to work at different Sony studios, still keeping the money that they're getting, right? The benefit that they're getting of still working at the Sony Interactive Entertainment umbrella. And that, I think, could be bad for Bungie, right? If they're having kind of all of their expertise leave to go work on other projects and to work for other studios in the PlayStation umbrella. So that's another thing. The one thing I wanted to get to, and we kind of got distracted, was why Bungie did this. This is the thing that hurts me the most, which is if you look at Sony's statements, they should be lauded for what they're doing. Like, this is such a good move for them. And I'm, as a PlayStation fan, I am really excited for what's going to happen with them. They've now got one of the biggest games as a service. They've got first-person shooter chops, which they badly needed. They've got a killer app for whatever streaming service they launch, right? Like, I'll have to be subscribed to the service now because I'm a Destiny player and a Bungie fan. So that's huge. It's a golden bullet for games as a service potentially, because they've got so many people who are so smart and know this industry and have been able to do things that not even the biggest publishers have been able to do. BioWare fails at Anthem. Ubisoft has struggled with The Division, but Bungie somehow has been able to stay alive in this games as a service industry, and that's huge.
I feel like they created a genre in some ways, like they augmented the MMO genre to suit first-person.
I would actually say they augmented the looter shooter Borderlands genre and ate that entire industry's lunch. Like, now if you play Borderlands, you're sort of like, this feels old, and it feels, even Borderlands 3 feels a little outdated, its formula. And I think it's because Bungie saw that and they were like, let's make that an online MMO, and they sort of killed the looter shooter genre. Like, there are no looter shooter games anymore that aren't online. If you think about it, they kind of all went that way. Even Borderlands sort of tried to copy that formula and didn't really do a great job, in my opinion.
Yeah, they did like a one toe in, one toe out, and it just
it was really weird. It was weird, man. That game came out, and I was kind of like, this feels like it should have come out 10 years ago when the industry was okay with these sorts of things. But that's just me. I don't know. But so anyway, my point is that I think all of Sony's messaging, if you're a Sony fan, if you own Sony stock, if you have some sort of interest in Sony in general, you should just be like cheering. Like, that was like, it's clearly a great move for them. Who I don't think should be applauded for their messaging, at least so far, is Bungie. And this
should they ever have been
right? Well, I don't know. Here's what I would have been okay with if Bungie's statement said, hey, look, we tried to go independent It's really tough to make it out here. We're doing this as a move to make Destiny better. I would be like, okay, I accept that. And I still wouldn't like the fact that they're not an independent studio. I would still have problems with that sort of stuff. Consolidation, especially this stage of companies, in my opinion, is still bad. But I would have accepted that and not been nearly as peeved as I am. The thing that was the gut punch is Bungie's reasoning. This is the main reason that I hate this deal. Bungie's reasoning had nothing to do with video games, and it had nothing to do with Destiny. And they don't mention that. In fact, all of their messaging is, we're going to keep the ship right and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. It's not about, hey, we need to make Destiny better and this is going to help some of the problems that we've been having with Destiny. It's all about movies. It's all about TV. It's all about music, right? So we've got this big independent company that is beloved by a lot of people who are saying that they want to be independent, who are saying that they want to blaze a new trail. And they sold out. And for what? So they could drop a hot single on Sony Music. That's why they did it, right? They did it because for the same reason Xbox came on stage in 2013 and said TV sports, because they want to be a big multimedia brand. They want movies and they want TV. That is not okay with me at all. I think it's a travesty. Destiny's story is one of the worst parts about it in the game. And the fact that they're trying to fix it, they think that movies and TV will fix that problem, I do not think is going to work. I think people are going to be like, whoa, this is a weird story that I feel like I'm jumping into the middle of on the movie and TV side. Or if they manage to tell an origin story, it'll feel so detached from the video game, it won't really matter, right? And maybe with a TV show you could develop it, but with music and that sort of stuff, I hate their reasoning for doing this. I hate that it's all about, we want to be a mega brand and we were too impatient to do it ourselves, so we're partnering with this big company, selling our entire company so that we can make a TV show because we want to be a Destiny anime.
All right, let me counterpoint then, because I'm curious to know some responses here. Because as diehard Star Wars fans, we've both seen Solo, and there are elements of Solo that I was like, yo, that straight up looks like Destiny.
Right.
And it got me excited for that. Star Wars fans also have seen big tentpole pillar Skywalker saga movies really have a divisive fan base. Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker are in my mind, and in that, storytelling felt rushed and strange. But the shows that are coming out now are doing a good job at kind of backfilling and telling more concentrated stories around it. That's Star Wars. In a separate medium, we're seeing Halo get its own TV show that is not going to be following the games or books, but is inspired by it. And I'm currently reading, I talked about this last week on XEP, currently reading the Witcher novels. They're fantastic. Playing through the Witcher 3.
I've read them all.
Blood of Elves. I'm on Blood of Elves, the first one.
That's a great book.
Yeah, and I've read, like, I guess you would say, like, impressions from people I trust about the rest of them, and that's why I was like, all right,
You didn't read The Last Wish first? That's the best one in my opinion.
No, I thought Blood of Elves was the first one.
It's the first one chronologically, but The Last Wish I think is the best one because it's vignettes. That's like a good one to start on because it doesn't really tell any single story. It just kind of tells a bunch of different ones. But yeah, interesting.
All right, good to know. But you have the novels, right? And then you have the game, and then you have the show. And all are the same characters and involvement, but they're not all the same story. They're not interwoven. It's not an extended universe in the sense that, like, it's all canonical to each other.
Yeah.
I would love, as an outside Destiny fan, a show like The Mandalorian or like what we're expecting Halo to be as an entry point into the series. And if I'm interested, then go play the game.
Sure.
To me, that sounds like a positive for the brand.
I can certainly see that point of view, but here's my counterpoint to that. Star Wars, Halo, and The Witcher all have one thing in common, which is that they were established franchises that have had a beloved story before they entered movie and TV. Destiny does not have that. Destiny doesn't have The New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi always in their back pocket. Destiny does not have books like The Witcher. Destiny does not have a video game story like Halo that is already top notch before it becomes a movie or TV. Destiny is trying to, but in my opinion, what Bungie's trying to do is they're trying to make up for the fact that the story in the game isn't good by searching for these other forms of media to tell that story. And it doesn't fix the problem. And it's based off of something that isn't good. right? Like if you
Mhm.
try to tell the story that's in Destiny, that movie is going to flop. The TV show is going to flop. If you try to tell something that goes alongside Destiny, then people are going to be like, oh, right, well, let's check out the game, and then find out that the game doesn't really have much of a story in the game. And that's my problem is like, I think you should only make movies and TV shows out of other medias that have shown that they are so good that they need to be shared and expanded on with the world. Halo meets that bar, Witcher meets that bar, Star Wars definitely meets that bar.
Mhm.
Destiny doesn't. And everybody who plays Destiny agrees. This isn't a minority opinion. This is a ubiquitous belief by everyone in Destiny that the story isn't good and never was, and that the only way that they've succeeded in telling good stories is these weird, grimoire entries or this side content that hasn't really helped fix the problem in the game. And regardless of whether you're happy or not about them getting publishing rights and being able to do TVs and movies, I think we can all agree there was another way to do that. They could have come up with they could have sold the rights to Sony just for movies and TV. They could have done it they could have just made a publishing deal for music if they really wanted to do that. But instead they sold their entire company. And if you read their statement, the reason they did it had nothing to do with video games. It had everything to do with multimedia. That is a painful realization to digest. It's really painful for me.
Okay. All right. That makes that. Now I'm gathering now kind of the better part of where you're coming from with it, and I see it. I'm still not convinced that casual fans will care.
You're probably right. And casual fans might not even notice, they don't read the news like we do. They might not even notice that this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally fair. I have a feeling that if they make movies and TV shows that they're not going to do particularly well, or they will do particularly well, and then people will sign on to the video game and be extremely disappointed and confused as to why the TV show and the video game are nothing alike. And then the other option is that they throw everything out and completely change the story to be more like the TV and movie. And then you've got video games chasing Hollywood, which is something I always hate, right? I hate it when video games try to parrot Hollywood or try to recreate what they're doing or chase their success. And so I want video games to be their own medium and to do what they've always done, which is just be experimental and weird and not really follow the rules of other traditional media. And like this just has the whole Xbox TV thing written all over it in my opinion. And I find it crazy that everyone else online doesn't see it that way. Because that was my first reaction, was just like, and I probably am in the minority here, just based on we did the Last Word recording on Thursday, and I was the only one on the panel who thought that this was a terrible thing. So I'm clearly in the minority here, but I would be surprised if I remained in the minority 4 or 5 years from now. That's my opinion.
Interesting. All right. Well, we have a couple questions about this one. Then I want to transition to talk a bit about Dying Light before we depart. But we did have people write in with Destiny related, TieGuyTravis related questions.
Oh, awesome.
This first one comes via email. You can always email me, guys, at insipidghost@gmail.com. This one comes from Keith L, aka Rocket Scientist on Xbox Live. He says, since Bungie has just bought Sony and Destiny, just bought by Sony, excuse me. Bungie just got bought by Sony.
Yeah.
And Destiny is a franchise in which I have spent approximately 5,000 hours. Goodness, Keith. I decided to ask a gun question. What is the favorite gun you have used or looted in a game, and why? His favorite gun is the year 1 Galahorn, which he got in year 3 via Atheon. He said his favorite gun to use is a rocket launcher from Unreal Tournament 99. It's a versatile weapon.
Nice.
So Travis, favorite gun you've looted in a game or Destiny specific?
Yeah. So my favorite gun I've ever gotten in a video game, it was actually in Borderlands 2. It's called the Conference Call, and it's called the Conference Call because it's a shotgun that you can snipe with, and you shoot in one direction, but then another storm of bullets comes from a 90-degree angle to the left of you, and they meet in the middle. So wherever you're pointed, it creates like an X of shotgun bullets. It makes no sense. The other bullets are just coming out of nowhere, right? They're like manifesting differently, but it's supposed to be like a conference call because two beams are like interacting with each other, right? It's an absurd weapon in Borderlands 2. It's like without a doubt the best weapon you can get, because you can snipe with it and it just shoots a hailfire of shotgun blasts from different directions. And I think I had 4 copies of that gun on my character, and they were all different elements. So that's my favorite gun I've looted in any game. I will always like laugh when I think about that gun. Also, I got to give the battle rifle from Halo, any Halo game, a shout out, because you don't really loot that gun, but that's probably one of my favorite weapons just to use. Favorite weapon I've looted in Destiny, definitely going to be an exotic, because I love the weird weapons. I'm going to go with Chaperone. Chaperone is a exotic shotgun. It shoots a single pellet. It just got nerfed RIP by Bungie, unfortunately. But I got that gun in D1, and then I earned it again in D2, and it's just such a good feeling. It doesn't shoot a birdshot, Luke. It shoots one slug. And so it's like a shotgun that you can like shoot mid range with. And if you proc a headshot, it will just kill anybody in one shot. And so it's so good because nobody's expecting it, right? Like they're rushing at you with a traditional shotgun, and then all of a sudden you just beat them from mid range and take them out. And they're like, what killed me? And then they see it's Chaperone and they're like, damn it, this guy. So it's like a shotgun that requires more skill than most shotguns. But if you can master it, you can absolutely destroy with it. And I've had Chaperone on my loadout for, competitive multiplayer in Destiny for a long time, and I'm probably gonna have to use it less because it just got nerfed, because it was a little bit overpowered. But I would say Chaperone's my favorite gun. I just love shotguns.
Good answers, and proving to me that you're the right guy to be asking these questions too. Because I was like, I like the shotgun in Gears, and I like the battle rifle in all Halos. So
yeah,
the DMR and Reach, I liked it. Come at me, Bloom fans. Or Bloom anti-fans,
Bloom haters.
Whatever.
I'm a Bloom hater too.
Are you? Nice.
Well, I'm not as much as some people. I got a friend named Teddy, and if you play Halo 3 with him, all he does is talk about Bloom and how it's the worst. Like he's really hard to be around. But I do think RNG in weapons is not a great choice philosophically, depending on what type of shooter you're trying to make. If you're trying to make a competitive shooter, definitely not.
Yeah, that's a good call. Let's see here. Next question comes from Captain Logan. He says, given their past, do you think Bungie will stay with Sony forever?
I hope not. And I would be surprised if they did, but if they do, it'll be because one of two reasons. It'll either be because somehow this deal that they struck where they're independent but wholly owned works out, which I have very little faith that it's going to work exactly as they planned in the long term. Or the second thing that could happen is that Bungie's culture can kind of slowly disappear as, people who think of themselves as Sony start working at Bungie, and the people who think of themselves as Bungie, independent organization that just got bought, leave, right? And that can kind of just be like a slow death, 1,000 cuts kind of thing. So I think that is pretty likely. The other option is that things go spectacularly badly and they have to leave again, just like they did with Microsoft and just like they did with Activision. Frankly, I don't think that that's very likely. I would be surprised if it went that badly. I think both parties are approaching this relationship knowing Bungie's history and knowing what Bungie wants out of it. And Sony is a very smart company. I have confidence in Jim Ryan. I don't think that that's going to happen. But if it did happen, I would be stoked, right? If Bungie somehow found themselves in another situation and they were just like, oh, you know what? This isn't exactly going how we thought it was going to go. We're getting out of here. I would just be like, all right, Bungie still lives, right? They still have that culture there of people who want to do their own thing. And if I'm completely wrong and they both keep the partnership with Bungie or with Sony and manage to keep their culture and their rebellious spirit and all that, if they're able to do both of those, I will fully admit I was wrong and be happy that this move happened. I just don't think that that's going to happen. So
gotcha. Okay. Last before we go, I do want to talk about Dying Light 2. Yeah. For listeners that were tuned in for my take on it, I got my code much later than I think Travis and Badbit and a few of the other people we've kind of talked about on this show with it. I'm really loving my time with it, Travis. I'm having a blast. It seems I did not get into the first Dying Light. I'm loving this game.
Oh, the first Dying Light was so good.
it just didn't click, and I bought the Super Collection or whatever it was, and it just didn't click. Bad timing, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say about 10 hours in. I'll say that, maybe a little less at this point, but I'm loving it right now, just based on when I got my code and had time to play.
Are you still in Old Villador?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't even met Rosario Dawson yet.
In my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've not met Rosario Dawson, who is literally, it's Rosario Dawson.
Yeah. She's great.
But
it's one of the best parts of the game.
You, my friend, did the IGN review. You're north of 80 hours in on it. You seem high on it as well. You noted to some listeners on Twitter that it had bugs. I've seen little to none. And you noted that they come in later in the game. So tell me a bit about that. And then let's sing some praises, because I don't know. Sometimes we accidentally talk about the negatives and forget to talk positives. So
really, I only have 2 negatives about the entire game. And unfortunately, those negatives are so big that it brought the score down to a 7. But if the bugs alone didn't exist, the game would at least be an 8, which at IGN an 8 out of 10 means great. A 7 out of 10, which is what I gave the game, means good. And I would say Dying Light 2 is without a doubt a good game as it stands right now. And I think without a doubt it will also be an 8 or a 9 later, right? Like easily, if you had me review this game a year from now, after it'd been patched, and they're planning on supporting it for 5 years, so I'm sure they're gonna have me review an expansion at some point down the road, and I'll be happy to do so. But my only 2 gripes with the game are, one, I don't think the main story is very good. I think the main character is extremely generic and boring, and his story doesn't really go anywhere. You'll kind of you get a lot of like promises kind of made to you in the first half of the game, and the promises are not fulfilled in the second half of the game. They sort of, it feels like they didn't know how to end their own game. And so it's a little odd. So that's my first problem, is just the main character is bleh. That's not that big of a deal, though. The first Dying Light didn't have a great story either. My second problem is more substantive, which is that it just has a ton of bugs. And so IGN got about 18 codes for this game because we're doing a Wikipedia for it, right? And so I'm in this Discord with all these people, and it was pretty regular for us to share all the different bugs across different platforms. So it kind of depends which platform you're playing on. If you're on PC, it seems to be more stable. I played on PC and on Xbox Series X. Those were my main platforms that I played on. On Xbox, I did 80 hours to complete one single playthrough, where I was not doing everything, but I did most of the stuff. And then I did another 25 hours on PC and got part of the way through it. Both games, I experienced quite a few bugs. Most of the bugs happen the longer you play the game. It's kind of like, you ever have like a Skyrim save file, and it seems like the longer and bigger and the more stuff you do, the more issues you have with that save file, until eventually you just kind of get frustrated, do something else. It's kind of like that with Dying Light. Like the first half of the game, or the first third of the game, probably more accurately, where you're in Old Villador and you're trying to solve that dispute between the 2 organizations that are there. That part is probably the best part of the game, both because it feels like a smaller, little self-contained mini story, and because the game is at its most stable state when you're in that part of the game. But the longer you play, the bigger your save file gets, the more issues you start having. I got 1 crash maybe in my first 30 hours, and then in my last hour of my save file, when I was approaching 80 hours, I was getting at least 1 hard crash like every hour. At near the end. Like, I think I got 5 crashes in 5 hours, and I was just like, damn, this game is falling apart. It's kind of like that old bit that they do in cartoons, where the guy's driving a car and it starts to fall apart as he's driving it, and then when he crosses the finish line, he's just holding the steering wheel. It's kind of like that. Like, it kind of just like it kind of just falls apart as you're driving the farther you get. So that's obviously a big problem. There's a day 1 patch that fixed a lot of stuff. It did not fix everything. 2 of our IGN reviewers now at this point have save files with 40 plus hours on it that they can no longer access because of a glitch that gives you an indefinite loading screen when you try to load up your file.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad one. I mostly experienced hard crashes and visual glitches. I had 1 quest that I couldn't complete because a character didn't spawn, stuff like that. So you'll start to see stuff as you go. But I think my first glitch didn't really happen until like maybe 10 or 15 hours into it. And then it just kind of got worse and worse and worse the longer I played. So I'm sure they will fix a lot of that, and when they do, it's great. I would just recommend, if you're going to play this game but you don't like glitches and stuff, you kind of you react poorly to that, just wait like 30 days, maybe 60 days, and then see if it goes on sale or something, and buy it a little bit down the road when they patch things out. However, if you don't care about that sort of stuff, you're willing to roll the dice, play it. It's a fantastic game. The things I love about it, I love so much about this game. I love the parkour. It never stops feeling amazing.
It's so much fun.
And it gets better. Like, you haven't even gotten to the part where you get like a paraglider and a grappling hook, and you
I'm seeing that.
Yeah, yes. You do crazy stuff. I love the upgrade trees. I love the windmill challenges where you have to climb them. I love the later on you get to start get utilities like power plants and water towers and stuff, and those challenges are some of the most fun activities in the game, where you're like solving these interesting puzzles. The combat is super fun. You can just drop kick people in the face all day, and it's hilarious. And also all the characters in the game, aside from the main character, are really good. Like, I really like Rosario Dawson's character Lohr. I did try to start a romantic relationship with her, which it seems like the game doesn't let you do, unfortunately.
What is this?
I know. What is this? It's 2022. Let me hook up with Rosario Dawson, guys.
Her first game appearance was in a game called Syndicate way back when.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool if you ever go Google some images of that, and you can see just the character models and the growth of it. It's kind of cool.
Her character model is fantastic. Unfortunately, you cannot hook up with it. I got as close as you can, though. I got the ending that's basically like, oh yeah, you and Lohr are besties, but it leaves it kind of unclear if it's a romantic thing, which is unfortunate. I think if I were Lohr, I wouldn't want to date my character either, because he's super boring, but I did all the right moves. So
yeah, I gotcha.
But yeah, I love that game, man. It's fantastic. And even though, I gave it a 7, which is a good score, but not great. I still plan on playing it down the road. I'm helping build the wiki for it right now for the IGN team. So I'm still playing the game actively on PC and Xbox. So yeah, I really, really like it. And once the bugs are patched, it'll be a fantastic game.
So listeners, you'll hear more from my takes on it. I want to put more time into it. I'm also loving the game, but I'm a tenth of where Travis was. So it's better to hear his voice this week. Check out his review on IGN. Travis, I've got to get going. I'm on a hard out at this point.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's the first time you've been on XEP. We've gotten to work together on Bitcast, but I hope it's not the last time you're here. Please let everyone know where they can find your content, what you would have them look forward to, or check out that's already out.
Yeah. So you can find my content on IGN.com. I do the Last Word of Destiny podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific. That's called The Last Word. You can find it on YouTube or follow me on Twitter at TieGuyTravis to see me post about it. And then I also do Bitcast every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific. It's way too early for me, but it's also the time we're doing this show. And then if you want to add me, this is an Xbox show. Full disclosure, I am an Xbox main. I try to do all my reviews and coverage on Xbox because it's the platform where all my friends are at. My gamer score is now 272,931 points. So how's that stack up against you, Luke? Am I beating you?
You are beating me. I'm in the I want to say the 170.
170. Wow, casual.
I think so.
So yeah, Luke is a casual, and that's all I have to say. Thanks for having me, Luke. I would love to be on this show again. I love talking anything related to Xbox, or in this case, Destiny.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you. You guys can, of course, find me on Twitter at InsipidGhost. Email the show, insipidghost@gmail.com. Please do support all your content creators with reviews, likes, and shares where appropriate. Have a great rest of your week, guys. Take care.